Okay, we're live now with our Migrant Women Reality Watch number 14. And we are very happy to have as our guest Ghada Jabbour, who is in Lebanon and Beirut, and she's the co-founder of KAFA. It's one of the leading organizations, or the leading feminist organization in Lebanon that works against violence against women. But I will not take time because we want to hear really what is the situation in Lebanon. And Ghada, if you can introduce yourself and about KAFA as well, your work, what you've been doing and what you're doing right now, first of all. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna, for having me. So as you said, KAFA is a feminist organization working on issues related to violence against women. We focus our work on three topics: domestic violence, sexual exploitation and prostitution, and trafficking of women, and child sexual abuse. These are the three areas where we work with. And our organization is service-based, so we provide services to women victims of violence, but we also do advocacy. So we're an advocacy group that aims at dismantling the systems of oppressions in Lebanon and introducing legal reforms and change of mentalities. Currently, after this blast, this terrible and horrific blast in Lebanon, we have put an emergency answer to support women who are affected by the blast. So what we started with is to contact right away the people that usually come to our center seeking support in this area where it was hit. So we communicated with them to see how we can help, and we are now providing case management, referral, psychosocial support if they need it, and we're providing cash assistance and food packages as well as hygiene kits. This was the direct first answer that we provided, and starting today we started to be present on the field. We have a tent in one of the areas where it was the most hit, and we're offering in the tent several services, including psychosocial support. I have to say that the magnitude of this blast is very, very big, and people are still under shock. Elderly people, children, women, men, everybody needs some kind of support, and psychosocial support is very important at this stage.
And what does the government do right now?
Honestly, it was a failed government before the explosion, and the explosion is a direct consequence of the failure of the government. So far, the government has not been present in the devastated area. When we talk to people, they tell nobody knocked their door to ask what has happened, what are the damages, how we can compensate. They're not there yet to map the damages. They're not there yet to see if people have a roof or not, what are their needs. So there's a lot of absence from the government. What's on the ground? The people on the ground are either volunteers from all over Lebanon. There's a big solidarity happening in Lebanon. You see everybody, youth and not youth, coming to devastated area, cleaning the glass on the floor, helping elderly, helping families, going into homes in order to clean and help. There's a lot of NGOs present in these areas, affected areas, but no presence of the government so far.
Mm-hmm. And we heard, I know maybe it's not some official numbers, that there are around 300,000 people whose houses somehow were affected by the blast, whether they're homeless, either completely lost the houses, or they're really damaged severely. And so where are all these people right now?
So the area that was most hit was the area around the port, and this area around the port is a very historic area. So the houses are really old and they're not so solid, and those were shaken a lot. And not only there are old houses in this area, the people who reside in this area are old as well. So when you watch TV, you watch a lot of old women sitting in a house with no roof and with no furniture whatsoever, and not wanting to leave because she's afraid if she leaves, she will lose completely the house and not be able to come back. There's a lot of houses with no solid structure anymore, so there's a danger and the risk that these houses will fall and later in this part of Beirut around the port. I don't know the number exactly. We don't have statistics yet because the mapping was not done. The counting was not done. But for sure, the area around the port was very hit, and there are a lot of people that have no houses anymore, not livable houses anymore. So some buildings were completely destructed. Other buildings were damaged to the point that it's not livable anymore. And the farther you go from the port, the destruction is limited to the facades of the house. So the windows, the doors are damaged, but the houses can be still livable for the outer areas.
And from the perspective of women, what does it mean for the also? I mean, okay, we don't have the numbers, but we can just assume that half of those people will be women and girls. What does it mean for KAFA's work and for the situation in Lebanon in general when you already have every fifth person as a refugee, and
Yes.
you have the settlements, but also I remember when I was visiting Lebanon, there are a lot of refugees who are basically, they don't have where to live. They're like wandering around and you can see these people in the streets. So what does it mean actually for refugee population and for women, this blast?
Well, like in every crisis, vulnerable people and women in particular are mostly they're hit more than the others. Uh, the media is not talking a lot about migrant women and refugee women. They're more concentrating on the families living in this area, but there are dozens of refugees that were killed, and I would guess among them migrant women, refugee women as well, and there are migrant female workers that were killed as well in the blast. It means for us what does it mean for us as an organization working for women? We want to make sure that support reach women. We want to make sure that resources are equally distributed. And within the distribution, there are no discrimination against women and there is no sexual exploitation against women. We have seen during the refugee crisis that some distributions and some contributions where there was sexual exploitation going on. So we want to make sure that women get support the right way.
When you say there was sexual exploitation going on, what do you mean exactly?
There are during the refugee. Lebanon hosts around 1.5 Syrian refugees in Lebanon, and there were a lot of anecdotal and information with evidence that the distribution of aid that sexual exploitation happened during distribution of aid, and this organization have put structure to monitor this, and we want this time that we want to make sure that sexual exploitation does not happen this time as well. So that is one of our objectives as well.
And generally, even before the explosion, this I remember this from visiting Lebanon, and when we were speaking about, if I put it correctly, so in those camps or settlements where refugees live, you have this situation with undocumented girls and boys, but of our interest are girls specifically, and those would be the kind of double refugees who are from Palestine and then to Syria and then to Lebanon, and they are kind of unrecognized, they don't have a status, and therefore, I mean, what I'm trying to say is that what I understood, there was a whole generation of young persons, and among of them a lot of girls, who didn't have any legal status. They didn't have citizenship, they didn't have documents, and we know how easy it is for a girl to disappear who is already doesn't exist on papers. Can you tell us more about that?
I mean, not only this group is even more vulnerable, but refugees in general, because they're undocumented in Lebanon, because we don't give refugee status in Lebanon, they're very vulnerable to exploit. They can be very vulnerable to exploitation. So the estimation is that 75% of Syrian refugees in Lebanon have no legal documents in Lebanon. So de facto, they cannot work. They cannot. There are a lot of obstacles in reaching education and accessing justice and accessing health services and other services because of their lack of legal documentation. And this is a big problem, and this makes them even more vulnerable to sexual exploitation, to being recruited in prostitution. We have many anecdotal information and many cases that we receive that are in this situation. And I have to say that the blast has added on the vulnerability of people in Lebanon in general and women in particular. So I'm sure you know that Lebanon has been going through a very severe economic crisis and financial collapse. And resources now are being very, very limited for everybody, let alone vulnerable groups such as refugees. And here I want to talk a little bit about the situation of female migrant domestic workers in Lebanon. They are in a tragic situation since October 2019, when the Lebanese pound collapsed completely and when the banks started to put limitations on withdrawals of money from the banks. Migrant domestic workers who already suffered a lot of discrimination and live under the kafala system of oppression, they started getting not paid. Their salaries that were accumulated and not given to them cannot be given to them anymore because employers cannot withdraw money from the bank, and dollars are not present anymore in the Lebanese market. They vanished. They were stolen by our leaders. So their situation really got worse and worse from the economic crisis to the COVID and now with the blast. What we're seeing now more often is migrant domestic workers at the door of embassies and consulate. Every day when you pass a consulate, you see tens of migrant domestic workers knocking the door of the consulate or the embassy, wanting to go home. Bring us home. This is they've been shouting this for months now. Because their employers are leaving them.
Sorry, Ghada, those domestic workers, they're mostly from which countries?
So in Lebanon, domestic workers come mainly from some African countries, in particular Ethiopia, and some South Asian countries like Bangladesh, also the Philippines, Sri Lanka. So we have different nationalities in Lebanon, and the number is big. We have around 250,000 migrant domestic workers in Lebanon to 300,000. So it's the largest female workforce in Lebanon, and this workforce, and as a group, as a class, is oppressed to a very far extent by a system that is called the kafala system of sponsorship. So they're completely dependent of their employers.
Can you explain for those who do not know what is the kafala system, please?
Kafala system is a set of practices that it's not a law, it's a set of practices by authorities that link the domestic worker to the employer and put the employer in a very
Powerful
situation where he decides if she can leave the country or not. He decides if she can break the contract or not, when she's paid. So basically, her residency and living conditions and employment are dependent from the employer. And if the employer is well intended, the relationship goes fine. But if the employer is abusive, he has total impunity, almost total impunity to do this. So this system has to be abolished ASAP. But this system, because of the financial crisis and because of the COVID and the consequences of COVID, has exploded completely. So the situation of the tragic situation of domestic workers in Lebanon is uncontrollable now. There are tens of thousands of women on the street or wanting to leave Lebanon, and they're completely stranded because they have no money to go back home, because employers, even those who are well intended, cannot pay them to go back home. In Lebanon, banks are allowing families to withdraw $100, $200 per week. It's nothing in order to pay the salary of a domestic worker and be able to provide for the family. That's a very brief idea, but to say that within this collapse and failure of the government and the results on the society, we see that there are very vulnerable groups that are hit even more, such as domestic workers, such as refugees. For example,
Go ahead.
No, it's really surprising. Well, not very surprising for people working in Lebanon or living here, that the names of refugees and migrant workers were not really circulated among the list of dead people in Lebanon. They're always treated as a third, fourth class citizens or people in Lebanon.
I just wanted to say that we saw on your Facebook, on KAFA's Facebook page, that there was a footage from basically like 2 days ago in front of the Kenyan embassy. I understand there were women protesting and dancing and singing. So this is probably like one example of what we were talking about. They were demanding to go home. And what do embassies or consulates are doing about it?
Well, there's a lot of migrant domestic workers communities in Lebanon that do not have an embassy. They have a consulate, and it's not a proper consulate, it's an honorary consulate. So it's a Lebanese man, usually, who is the consular, and he is in charge of taking care of the community in Lebanon. And they do not have any budget. So basically, they refer to the embassy in the region for any problem. Those consulate and as well the embassies are generally very they don't have the means to support their communities in Lebanon, and sometimes they do not want to support their communities in Lebanon. In the case of the Kenyan workers, it's been 3 days that they're on the street. They have spent 2 nights sleeping in front of the Kenyan consulate, and they were able to pressure the consulate to the point of getting a promise from him, a pledge from him, that he will cover all tickets back home. And to the point where the general security today, a few hours ago, went to the street, took their names, took the list of names, and the passport numbers and IDs in order to facilitate their going back home. Mm-hmm. So this group of women show that their voice is important, and and is very, very powerful. They were faced first by, of course, a dismissive attitude that is usually present when they raise their concerns. We have heard them talk that the embassy staff were telling them, go into prostitution, go prostitute yourself if you don't have enough money to pay the ticket. So basically, they were sent back and not offered any support, but they insisted, and they were able to get a very serious promise, and they were able to bring the general security officers, the immigration officers, to the street in order to take their demand into consideration. So this will happen. We have to wait and see. But honestly, this is the first time where such insistence and perseverance happens. And this is the first time where the general security goes on the street, listen to the concerns of domestic workers, and reach out to them.
Okay, and just to go back, when you said about the money transfer and the situation that it's impossible to withdraw more than 100 or 200, right? And this also limits the possibility, because we know it, we were trying, or some of our members were trying to transfer some funds into, like, immediately after the explosion, and then there are limitations how much you can withdraw. So how actually you are dealing with this as an organization, and we have put the link to the fundraiser that you have, so I hope people will donate and they will share it. But is there any other way how, if somebody wants to contribute and if somebody wants to send money to Lebanon, how do they do it apart from sending cash with someone?
Yes. So in Lebanon, there are restrictions on liquidity and on bank accounts. Because dollars do not exist anymore, they evaporated because of fraud and corruption. So the banks are only giving people money in Lebanese lira, which is very devaluated now and is worth practically very little. And they're putting a limit. It depends on the banks. Some banks can allow $200, $300 per week, $1,000 per month, $2,000. It depends really on the bank, but there's a lot of limitation. However, there's a kind of loophole or a flexibility when the money comes from abroad. It's considered as fresh money if you have something called offshore account. So NGOs, for example, have this type of account where they can receive money after the crisis, after October 2019, and are able to withdraw fresh money without limitations. Until when the situation will keep going on, I don't know. Maybe tomorrow, with all this volatile situation, NGOs will not be able anymore to do this. It's really very a shaky situation that can change at any time. I'd like to seize this opportunity to thank Donor Direct Action, who have put a fundraising initiative worldwide for KAFA in order to support women. We're very grateful for this initiative. We have received a lot of interest in donating food, time, money, support, people knocking on our door, giving us clothing. There is a woman who called us who wants to give a quantity of steel. Of steel, so that people can do the iron, the windows and the doors. So there's a lot of solidarity happening inside Lebanon and also outside Lebanon.
Well, that's
so
nice.
We hope this. Yeah.
And just the last question. I know that you don't have much time, and we're going to finish soon. Do you expect, as we do, that there will be a wave of emigration of more Lebanese people leaving Lebanon and going elsewhere in search for economic opportunities and so on?
Absolutely, and I am very, very. It's a very sad situation. Everybody in Lebanon wants to leave. The people who have an opportunity to leave are leaving with no hesitation, and those who are staying, it's because mainly they don't have an opportunity to go outside. And it's a very sad situation because we need people to stay in Lebanon in order to build again and in order to shake the system. Of course, there are still people who are not willing to leave at all. You can see them in the streets. We had a very big protest after the blast. So when people when this surreal situation happened and people started again to realize the extent, they went to the street, and we have been having protests since October 2000. It slowed down COVID, but now it's gaining momentum again. I hope this blast will be the tipping point for a change, because Lebanon cannot continue like this. A country cannot continue being its political class being greedy. All they want is to fill their pocket of money, and they do not have any consideration for the people and the population of Lebanon. It cannot continue like this.
Okay. Do you have anything else to say to our audience, which is in Europe mostly, from Lebanon, before we finish?
The solidarity that is coming from everywhere in the world, including Europe, is something that is needed, but also it is very heartwarming. It's very important not to feel alone in this situation. People feel alone in Lebanon, very much so. And solidarity is important, whether it comes from individual organizations, states. It is important.
Well, we're going to continue showing our solidarity in the limited ways that we can. We, of course, have a lot of Lebanese women who are our members in the network, and I know that some are planning to travel to Beirut to do something to support their families, at least maybe temporarily. And yes, we will stay in touch. And everybody, once again, please donate. The link is above, and you can see about amazing work of KAFA that we didn't have so much time to discuss, but I also invite everyone to explore their website and follow their social media and support them in every possible way. Thank you. Thank you, Ghada.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.